Hello and welcome back to another episode of Sports Speak. I'm your host, Tanyon Loose.
I'm your co-host, Spencer Ripchik.
As you can tell by my shirt here, there's a little bit of a basketball game tonight that I'm quite heavily invested in. So, I don't know, Spencer, you are a little bit of a Duke fan over there. How'd you feel about the game tonight?
Yeah, I was, as a Duke fan growing up, it was pretty tragic to see Coach K end like that. But, I mean, UNC's looked hot all this whole tournament, and they're still looking hot. And hopefully, not that I'm a Duke fan anymore, but I have Kansas winning it all in one of my brackets, so I would like to see them take home the win tonight. But yeah.
Funny enough, I also have Kansas winning.
Oh.
Several of my brackets, actually. But we'll see how it goes. But since it's not a North Carolina podcast, I can proudly wear my baby blue shirt here and root tonight, but that's not what we're here to talk about today, obviously. We're here to talk about some Penn State sports. So, as we do with every single week, we're going to get started with our favorite news. So, Spencer, why don't you get us started this time around?
Yeah, I think we talked about gymnastics once on this podcast, so I'm going to go back to it in men's gymnastics. They had their Big Ten championships this weekend, I think. And Chase Klingman won the pommel horse title at the Big Ten championships. He came in with a personal best score of 425, and he beat out defending national champion Ian Skirky of Illinois, who scored a 14.375. So yeah, he did pretty well there, and he did in his hometown of Rec Hall. So yeah, it's pretty nice.
Gymnastics, very underrated sport here at Penn State. Both teams are pretty solid. They've had some success over the years for sure. But my news is we're branching outside of Penn State again just a little bit. I talked about Isaiah Brockington, I think, last week, and now this week we got more basketball in the news, and it's not because of something that happened at Penn State. Is Dan Earl, who's now the Chattanooga coach. He was a pretty solid player back in his days at Penn State. Him and his brother were well-renowned basketball players around the Jersey area, and he ended up coming to Penn State and then ended up coaching here for several years. I believe he spent 12 years as an assistant. State College, he came back and coached under his old head coach, Ed DeChellis, who's the coach at Navy. And he was hired as head coach at VMI, and I think I wrote a story on him a little back ago where his first game ever as a head coach was back at Penn State. And so then he played them again the other year at VMI where they once again fell. But he's had some decent success at the SoCon there at VMI. He's went 500 for 2 straight seasons now. Doesn't exactly roll off the tongue too well there, 500. Not exactly the best record, but when you consider where he's doing it, I mean, coaching at a military institute, not exactly the greatest recruiting tool. There, I don't know how many recruits are going to want to go play a military academy when you got a lot of other options out there. So the fact that he's going 500 is pretty impressive at that school. So now he's going to have a lot more to work with, a lot more resources at his disposal at Chattanooga there. They've been pretty solid in the most recent years, I think. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. And there's been a number of Penn State kind of alum moving into some more prominent roles of recent years.
Yeah, I think if my memory serves me correctly, I think Chattanooga made it to the NCAA tournament this year, and they took an L to Illinois. But they did. NCAA tournament bid is pretty good, and he gets some stuff into that job now, and maybe he can take him back there.
We'll see. Exactly. I think we're going to move into our first segment now, and that is one that we've talked about briefly. So they're a little bit kind of in the middle of the season right now, and that is men's lacrosse. They have not exactly had the greatest start to their season, so we're going to kind of take a look at what has really gone wrong for this team, I guess, so far, and kind of take a brief look at their schedule and their upcoming schedule.
Yeah, so, I mean, they obviously 2-8. I mean, it's not where you want to be, especially since last season. They're still not very good, but at least they were halfway decent. And I think what's gone wrong has been their defense. I mean, 9 out of 10 games this year, Penn State's let up 10 goals, which, I mean, is not what you want, especially playing against some of the best competition in college lacrosse in the Big Ten, and with Maryland being like one of the best teams in the whole country. I mean, they're missing some key defenders, obviously. Like last year's captain, Nick Cardio, has gone on, and he's not there anymore. So now they have some younger guys like freshman Pup Buono and Kevin Parman have been both of 2 Penn State's top defenders, and they're both freshmen. So, I mean, they have to lean on some younger guys there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was a tough start to the season, this squad, for sure. But, I mean, I really thought that things looked like they were kind of turning around a little bit. I know they had the tight loss to St. Joe's by 2 goals in February, but then they came back with that huge win against Yale, and I was like, oh, wow, this could be kind of a time when things are looking up for this team. They lost by 1 against number 6 Penn, which, I mean, you can't really hang your hat on that one too much. Another 1-goal loss to a top 5 Cornell team. So 2 back-to-back games against top 6 opponents. They're only losing by 1 goal after coming off a top 5 win. You would think that this team kind of has a bright future ahead of it, and it just really looks like the wheels really came off the track after that. Had a tough loss to Bucknell, and they got blown out by Maryland and Ohio State. And I think this team is a little bit mentally defeated right now after those tough losses, kind of back to back right there, and then just now things are kind of getting blown open a little bit. And like you said, the defense not been great, giving up a good amount of goals, but their offense has not helped them at all. I mean, when you're looking across the Big Ten, a lot of teams at the top of the conference have guys who have 20, 30-plus goals. Penn State's leading scorer at 16 right now, and that's Jack Kelly, the midfielder there. He's had a fairly solid season, but they just need a lot more production up front there on the attack, and they're last in goals and second to last in assists in the conference, with only Michigan behind them in assists. And I mean, that's obviously a major problem there. They're averaging almost 18 turnovers a game as well, which is dead last in the Big Ten by a considerable margin there compared to some of the other teams up towards the top, averaging like 13, 12 in a lot of areas. So that's a really big gap that you gotta look at, I think. But I mean, really, I'm surprised that things have fallen off this dramatically, especially during that run there where they had a couple 1-goal losses in the win over Yale. Their offense looked to be clicking really pretty well. I know they had Jeb Brenflick, Matt Costin, Mark Sickler all scoring multiple goals a game over that streak for the most part. And I mean, they were competing with some of the top teams in the nation. But it's just tough to really put a finger on what has led to this dramatic fall off.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of everything, kind of. I mean, their offense has been good, their defense has been good, and the other area we looked at is their goalkeeping situation has been. It's been like a hot topic from last year to this year. I mean, last year they're dealing with, do they keep the senior in, and then they put Alec Fayek in, who is a younger guy, and now this year they turned to Alec Fayek, but then they've also put in another younger guy, so they've been switching on and out, and both of them haven't looked great. I mean, and then like you said, other than the defense, turnovers have been a big problem, and like you said, they're last in the Big Ten. But then another area is their face-off percentages aren't very great. Their after like Gerard Arceri's departure, who was one of their better face-off guys, and then I think this team just needs to improve in all those areas. And I mean, this Big Ten schedule is coming up is not great for them either. They have some powerhouses that they're going to take on, and I think it's just going to, like you said, they're kind of like their head's not in the right place right now, and I think this is not going to make it any better.
Yeah, I think so. They got Hopkins coming up on the schedule there, Rutgers, Michigan, but I mean, it's tough. I mean, that you see the schedule they're playing is pretty brutal. They're playing multiple top 10 teams. I think it's been 4 now on the season, as well as Villanova is now ranked inside. I think it's a top 20 or 15, so they've really moved up as well. So they've played a dominant schedule, I think, but it's not something that's going to change in the near future. So at some point, you really can't say, like, oh, darn, like we were playing really tough teams and we played them close. At some point, you're going to have to beat those teams. They're not going to be going anywhere over the next coming years. So this program really has some growth to do, especially given the previous highs that it's had over recent years. I mean, the fall off has been quite dramatic, I think, from where this team was to where they are now. I mean, Jeff can definitely get him back there, but it's just going to be interesting to see. They really could go in either direction. It could be they kind of ascend back to where they were, or they could just keep going down a hole. So, something to keep an eye on, but we're going to move on to our next segment now, which is a little bit of a new topic here that we're going to bring on to the show, and we're going to talk a little bit of college football, but not necessarily just Penn State. We're going to look at the national landscape a little bit, talk about some of our favorite traditions that we've witnessed both on TV, in person, etc., throughout our young lives here. And so we came up with a list of 10, and we each rank them individually. So they're going to be the same traditions, but in a little bit of different order between us here. So I'm going to let Spencer start us off first, I think, with his number 10 slot.
So I went with the run down the hill, Clemson's run down the hill, just because I feel like, I mean, it is pretty cool to have the players run out and see all the fans on the side and stuff, but I feel like any team could really do that. I mean, I feel like Penn State's is up there where they run out and the gates open and all teams really run out. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of, for tradition, I don't know how great that is.
Yeah, not gonna lie. I'll admit I have that one considerably higher. Coming up, my number 10, I have the dotting of the I at Ohio State. I mean, their band has always been kind of renowned, I guess, across the country, and they're quite coordinated and everything, but the whole dotting the I thing, it's cool. Obviously, I mean, it's the reason why it's on this top 10 list here. I mean, all these are obviously pretty solid traditions. I mean, they wouldn't be on our top 10 list if they weren't, but eventually you got to make some cuts. And I think that one kind of fell to the bottom of the list for me. It's interesting, but it's not too spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, this is spoiling my number 9. I also have dotting the I pretty low. That's my number 9. I mean, there's a lot of good college bands out there. I think Ohio State's one of the better ones. I mean, they have like fight scenes going on during halftime, but I feel like, I mean, it's not that great. I mean, you just kind of just dot the I, kind of self-explanatory, but yeah, so that's why I have it pretty low. And I feel like if a band really wanted to do that, they could do that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think just see if I can experience that in person one day. I have to get to a Penn State Ohio State game, and then I can make an accurate statement on that one there. Coming at my number 9, I have the Sooner Schooner, little wagon there that they ride out. So I personally really like this one. However, I had to dock it a few spots after the incident they had a year or two ago where the whole wagon fell over. Not exactly the best look for the Sooners there, but I mean, it's a cool concept. I always like getting like live animals involved in the whole introductory ceremony there. So I like it. It really fits with their mascot as well, and I think it's a cool scene.
Yeah, well, I don't know. You said yours got docked because it fell over. I think mine went up because it fell over. I raised mine. But that's not my number 8 is the Aggie War Hymn. I mean, it's kind of cool, but I don't think it's as great as it's kind of like it's kind of like how Penn State does their like Old State kind of thing. It's kind of like a traditional thing. I mean, every school has it. I don't really think it's too unique. But yeah, I think it's better than dotting the I and running down the hill because I feel like that's even easier to do. So yeah.
Yeah, I will admit that may or may not be my number 2.
Oh, really?
There. I mean, it is like somewhat of like their alma mater kind of. It's like their cry there, but I think the big difference is that I mean half the time for the alma mater at Penn State, you have half the stadium's gone already before that. But then when they're doing that, there's 100,000+ people there, and it's every single adult, child, student all at once. Which really, the sense of community is a big kind of value when I'm making my list here. So I think it's all about the culture there for me, and that's another reason why one of Penn State's traditions is going to be very high on both of our lists. I think is the involvement of sheer number of people is a big factor for me. But I'm going to drop down back to my number 8 kind of ranking here, which is Army and Navy's kind of march that they do in the beginning of their I mean, the game itself is a tradition. It's kind of a rivalry that exists outside of college football. It's kind of it sits in its own right. It's not played during rivalry. It's played after most of the games are over in the season. But it's just very cool to see both the midshipmen and the Army cadets there doing their march before the game. And it's there's a reason why this game is one of the most time-honored traditions across college football.
Yeah, and then it's my number. I think we're number 7 now. My number 7 is the Army Navy March On. I think it's really cool how they get everybody out there and they all march on. It's a good United States thing to do, especially during like such a United States game and very. I mean, it's America's like game pretty much because it is America. 2 things America. Yeah, so I have them as I think that's number 7 or 6. I think it's number 6. Yeah.
Yep. My number 7 then is my War Eagle flight. So I'm excited I'll be able to witness this one in person this upcoming year and make the trip down to Auburn for Penn State's game there. But I've heard some pretty interesting stories about this one. I really should have confirmed this before, but I've heard through the grapevine that one time the Eagle flew out of the stadium during the flight.
I'm sure it did.
But I mean, that's the risky take when you're involving some live animals. I remember watching the Texas-Georgia game the other year when Beaver tried to attack Georgia's mascot.
My favorite moments in college football ever.
That was quite a scene there. But another one where I enjoy the involvement of the actual mascot. It's not just someone in a suit walking around out there. They have an actual trained bird flying around the stadium, and everyone's got their arms up and everything, and get to land on them and stuff like that. So I think it's pretty cool. And I mean, Eagle's also a pretty majestic bird. The War Eagle mascot itself is a pretty cool one. I'd say it's definitely towards my top of my list there as far as college mascots go.
Yeah, and then my War Eagle's up there on my list too, but my next one is Enter Sandman, which I think is pretty cool. I'm from New York, so I'm a Yankees fan, so Mariano Rivera always came out to Enter Sandman, so that's what reminds me of it. So yeah, it's a similar vibe. I think
that's mine as well, and so we can kind of talk about this one and join it there. But Virginia Tech supposedly has arguably the greatest entrance, so I don't. That's up to interpretation there. I have one more above it there, as far as my list goes, and I think it's cool that they can use a song to do it, but I also think that it's also part that the song is somewhat carrying the entrance as well. So I have to kind of dock it down a rung or two there because it's not inherently from the college itself there, but it is. I've heard the atmosphere is just entirely electric. It's another scene that I definitely want to witness in person at some point in my life, and I mean all those are obviously very cool. But I'll drop down to my number 4 because that's kind of a similar sentiment there. I have the Clemson's entrance, the Howard's Rock, touching the rock, running down the hill there. I think yes, it might not be the most creative thing, but I also think it's very unique as far as other entrances go. Like how many teams are coming down through the stands. I mean, it's obviously there's a whole grass patch that they run through, but they're coming down from an upper level, running past everyone that gets to cheer them on as they're running through. Whereas in a typical entrance, like the one you're seeing here in your screen, everyone's above them, having to look down. But in this case, you're actually eye level with the players, depending on where you're sitting in the stadium there. And Howard's Rock obviously is a big importance to the program there at Clemson. So that was my number 4.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go with my number 5 is the War Eagle flight. Like you said, it's a live animal. I think it's pretty cool how it flies through the stadium. I think it's pretty cool. I think the Baltimore Ravens kind of did but theirs was more and then they did the whole VR or whatever thing. Yeah. So that was pretty crazy. Yeah, I don't know. I think real animals are good. Even when it goes bad, it makes national television because it goes crazy like the Bevo Ugga thing. And then my number 4 is the Iowa Wave. I mean, it's for the kids. So, I mean, it's always great to get the patients involved into it. And I think it's always a great tradition as well to have good charity work. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I have that one at number 3. That's one of these traditions that I've actually had the blessing of experiencing that in person. It was a pretty cool experience, I must say. Whether it was both home and away fans all getting together, waving to the children there. It went on for a lot longer than I expected, to be honest. I didn't usually see a clip or two for 10 seconds on social media somewhere, but it's quite the experience where you see a lot of people get emotional during it. You even saw some of the Penn State players really getting into it there, and it's something that the kids obviously value up there, and that's one of my top 3 traditions. Of course, just the value it brings, the sense of community that it brings to the Iowa community there. And as well as any really opponent that's coming, you feel welcomed into the environment there that you can participate in that. So that's why it's one of my top 3.
Yeah, my number 3, breaking my top 3, is the jump around. I think that's really cool. I remember my dad showed me it for the first time. I was like, wow, they really just break this out in the middle of the game. Everyone gets jumped, everyone gets hyped. Even I think it's Wisconsin. I mean, they've had a pretty good football team over the past couple of years, and I feel like it's even better when you're winning. Everyone gets up, they get down. That's how the song goes.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
That was definitely one of the cool. I didn't realize I skipped over that kind of thing. That was my number 6 actually.
Oh.
I got too anxious with my inner Sandman take there, but yeah, jump around is definitely one of the cool things. I've never been there in person. I had a friend who's been to a Wisconsin game before, and he talked about how surreal it is. So I've heard the stadium really gets shaken there, and that's obviously brings some value to the noise and everything. It's an interesting. I mean, I like also the fact that it is kind of heading into the fourth quarter there. I think is when they do it. So I think that adds some kind of. I don't know what the word I'm looking for here. Some tension to it because you're approaching the most important point of the ball game there, obviously. So I like that they have one of their big moments right there, one critical point. And I'll drop down. I mean, we already talked over my number 2 a little bit. Obviously, I like the Aggie War Hymn. I think that obviously they're one of the largest stadiums in the country, and the fact that they can get nearly every single person in there participating in one thing is a cool factor with me. And I really do like the sense of tradition that it also brings because, I mean, it's a time-honored song for a really solid program there and everything. I've heard that really the environment at Texas A&M can rival that of Penn State's Whiteout or other SEC schools easily.
Yeah, SEC does it different down in the South. But my number 2 is the Sooner Schooner, mainly because I think it's just really cool how it's so fast and just comes out and just goes around. I mean, they did have that one fall at one time, but again, when it goes bad, it goes on national news, and I mean, I thought that was pretty funny. Even though, good thing nobody got hurt. Yeah, exactly. I don't think it would have been funny if people got hurt, but I still think it was pretty dope, and they tried to recover it pretty well. So yeah. That's my number 2.
Well, then moving on to our number 1, I think we've both clearly omitted one significant tradition. So I haven't seen your list, but I can pretty much guarantee I know what number one is, and I'm pretty sure that is Penn State's whiteout.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason why it's up there for sure.
Yeah, I think it's just one of the best, not even being biased because I go to Penn State, but it's one of the best atmospheres in college football and all of sports maybe. I don't know about Europe soccer. I've heard it's pretty good too, but I mean, it's just, you see it up on the screen. It's just kind of nuts. Like, everyone wears the same color. It's 176,000 people. It's a lot of people.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
It's the spectacle together that I think vaults it to the top of my rankings there. Whereas a lot of these things will be maybe a 15, 20-second thing. It's really a prolonged experience throughout the whole game. And yes, I've heard people say, like, oh yeah, other environments can rival this, whether it's a night game at Death Valley at LSU or a good game at Kyle Field at Texas A&M. I can't really consider those as traditions because, I mean, it's not just a once a year thing, and it's not something that people are really looking forward to for an entire year in advance. You finish up the whiteout, and people are already like, oh, I can't wait for next year's whiteout already, whether it's 364 days away. So I think it's just the mass hysteria of the event. You have everyone wearing the same color. It's always the biggest game, arguably, of Penn State's season, their biggest home game at least. The players are clearly excited for it. The opponents obviously fear it for good sense, as people have seen with the legendary Michigan clip there. And it's a reason why it's on a lot of college football fans' bucket list, is you really hear all the time, you got to get to a whiteout game at Penn State. And it's something the program's done a great job with. They really used it as a hallmark for this program, a great recruiting tool. I mean, you see like 300 plus recruits on the field for the games there, and I mean, it's something that's really pushed Penn State back up towards national prominence.
Yeah, definitely. I think it defines college football. I mean, there's nothing more college football than the Penn State whiteout game. And I feel like the other thing about it is a lot of other colleges try to copy it. I know, like, Ohio State had their red out or something like that.
Scarlet out.
Yeah, so I mean, a bunch of other a bunch of other programs try to copy it, but nothing has topped it. So that's why it's number one on both our lists.
I agree. So yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to this year's game when Ohio State comes to town. But I think that about wraps up our list there, and I think that's going to wrap up this podcast for this week. So that's all we have. We're going to be back with another episode next week as usual.
Yeah, if you like this podcast, please consider subscribing. Thank you, and have a good rest of your week.